All right, everyone. Hi, this is the F Word Spark, and today Melissa and I are going to be talking about feminism. We're both advocates for feminism and both self-identify as feminists, and if you are a male in the room, we ask you not to disengage, because men can be feminists too, and we need you as allies.
So Breyn and I both served as Panhellenic president at the University of San Diego, and we found that the more involved we got in Panhellenic and other leadership opportunities, the more we both really identified with feminism and saw how feminism can create positive social change within the Greek community.
Our roadmap for the day is that we'll talk about 3 stories that demonstrate how the creation of sororities paralleled the first wave feminist movement. We'll also make connections between fraternal values and feminist values. We'll give a working definition of feminism, and we'll tell you how feminism can inform movements to create positive social change in Greek communities.
One revolutionary leader in our sorority community is Betty Locke Hamilton. She founded Kappa Alpha Beta after being asked to wear the badge of fraternity without knowing their ritual. And so from the beginning, the idea of equal access has really been fundamental to sororities.
Frances Willard, who was an Alpha Phi, was also a revolutionary leader. She was the first dean of women of the Women's College at Northwestern University, and she later became involved in the women's suffrage movement. She gave 400 lectures per year for 10 years on this and other social issues. She was one of many women's rights activists in the early sorority community.
The first public act of Delta Sigma Theta was participation in the Women's Suffrage March in Washington, D.C. in 1913. And so, as Bree said earlier, the history of sororities is really strongly linked to the first wave of feminism.
So given our history, we'd like to pose the question, why don't our organizations talk about feminism today? And like I said, men can be feminists too. But given the fact that we are all women's organizations as sororities, we think it's kind of funny that we don't talk about feminism, especially since we're built on the value of sisterhood.
And like Bree said, feminism is not anti-man, and it's also not an angry or militant movement, but instead, it's one that's really rooted in love. We have a lot of negative stereotypes about feminism because of the media. You never really see positive representations of feminists in the media.
So here are some examples of what feminism is. It's a way of life and courage blended with tolerance.
When I let my lyre send forth the chords of love, unselfishness, and sincerity.
When I exercise the widest influence for the good.
Building balanced leaders for the world's communities.
Service to humanity.
Respecting the dignity and worth of persons.
Social justice and selfless service.
And so, like you see, these are taken from the open mottos and creeds of some of our organizations, and this really tells us something about what our founders thought about how we should be living our lives.
A working definition of feminism is that it is recognition that discrimination exists and that everyone has a responsibility to work toward eradicating it. Bell Hooks talks about feminism as a movement to end sexist oppression, which includes oppression and marginalization not just on the basis of gender, but on the basis of race, class, ethnicity, and sexual orientation.
So an important question for us to consider is how can feminism inform movements to create positive social change within the Greek community?
One thing we can do is we can challenge event themes that perpetuate racism, sexism, and other systems of oppression. Pip and Ho parties are one of these examples. These types of parties perpetuate stereotypes about particular communities that divide rather than unite all of us. A second example is an event theme that took place in San Diego, which is where we're from. And although it didn't happen at our school, at the University of San Diego, it happened at a neighboring school. And it wasn't an official chapter event, but every time a negative event theme happens, it gets generalized to the rest of us. And this is how the negative stereotypes about Greek members are perpetuated across the country.
And feminism challenges us not to be bystanders. It charges us to take individual responsibility for the collective or for the common good. And so what that means is speaking up when our brothers and sisters do something that's against our values, even if it's not at an official event or when they're wearing letters.
Feminism also calls on us to be in solidarity with others, particularly as they're struggling. This relates to sisterhood. Feminism also calls on us to be an ally and to speak up. One example of this is when we speak up against hate language in our chapters.
Feminism also calls on us to create partnerships, to break down barriers between people and groups, and to share our resources. There are so many amazing opportunities on our campuses to partner with organizations like the Women's Centers and multicultural groups to create positive social change in our community.
Feminism can also be used as a leadership paradigm. Feminist leadership is values-based, it's relational, process-oriented, non-positional, focused on empowerment, rooted in love, and feminism tells us that leadership is not an act, but a way of living.
And all of these things are things that we value within our Greek organizations. We're focused on the empowerment of our brothers and sisters. We're rooted in love. And for all of us, being Greek is not an act or something that we do, but it's a way of life.
So given our history and the values that our founders call on us to live every day, we'd like to pose the question, how can you be Greek and not a feminist? And Melissa and I don't think that you can. Thank you.
Thank you.